Hi,
Hi, Donna.
we ready to go?
Ready.
We're webcasting, we're recording, all good?
All good. Ready to go.
Lovely, thank you very much.
No worries. Do you want me to admit the public yet or not just yet?
Yes, please. Yep,
Okay.
that's fine. Thank you. Okay, we ready to go, Lisa?
Ready.
Fantastic. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Central Coast Local Planning Panel. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we are working today, and to pay respects to elders, past and present, and future cultural knowledge holders, and to recognise their continuing connection to lands and waterways. As you probably know, this meeting is being recorded and webcast, so there should be no other recording of the meeting. The panel members today are myself, Donna Reigate, I'm the chair. We have Grant Christmas and Greg Flynn, who are our expert professional panel members, and Glenn Watts, who's our community panel member. So welcome, gentlemen. We have no apologies. As you know, we're considering a range of applications today that meet the criteria set by the state government for public meetings. A proposal in Long Jetty for a number of buildings, units, pool, basement, car parking, etc. Another one in Booker Bay, a demolition of an existing dwelling and construction of a two-storey dual occupancy, etc. Another matter in Umana Beach for multi-dwelling housing, and a proposal at Kilcare for alterations and additions. You may also be aware that later on, outside the public meeting, we'll be looking at the council's request for advice on the preparation of a planning proposal, and the panel's role on that is purely advisory. It's a matter that council determines, and members of the public have the usual opportunities to have their say on council's consideration of that. As you know, we have always received reports from council staff on the matters that we're looking at today. We've also done site orientation and briefings with the council staff. We've got a number of people registered to address us today. For those who haven't done this before, what happens is that this afternoon is the opportunity for the panel to hear from members of the community and applicants or the representatives, and for the panel to ask questions if we need to clarify our understanding on things. We normally hear from members of the community and then the applicant's representative. The applicant gets a total of 15 minutes to reply, but each member of the community gets 3 minutes to have their say. Yeah, I think that after all those preliminaries, we might move into the agenda. Declarations of interest. We've received conflict of interest forms from everybody on the panel saying that they have no conflicts in relation to the matters we're looking at today. Has any of that changed, gentlemen? No changes.
No changes.
Terrific. We've got minutes of a previous meeting that are in the papers today that have been endorsed by the chair of that one. We're asked to note those. Are people happy to note? Yep, great. The next thing we need to do is move straight into the business of the meeting. So for the agenda item 3.1, which is Tawoon Bay Road, Kitchener Road, Centennial Avenue, Long Jetty, we have Sean Piper who is going to speak to that matter first. So over to you, please, Sean.
Hi, everybody, and thanks for giving me the chance to discuss on the panel. So I've just got a couple of concerns, and I'll just, so one of my concerns is I can see there's a proposal to build up to 10 stories high. So I'm just concerned in the area, there's currently most dwellings in the area, say up to 3 stories high. So I'm just concerned about neighboring properties building at that height, just blocking sunlight and things like that. And the other issue as well is the area that it's in, it can be a very congested area in terms of traffic, and it's also a high tourist area. So concerns around just with that amount of units being put in, the streets that it surrounds are already very busy, and just that level of congestion would just, for neighboring properties, it would be a big issue of concern. And also my other concern is with guests that would be arriving, parking on the street and things like that. But my main issue of concern is just with the height, just in terms of, there's nothing kind of like that in the suburb, and the suburb doesn't really suit that level of development. I think it's just a small, like, suburban area where most of them are small unit blocks and townhouses. So yeah, they're my main kind of concerns.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We appreciate you coming along and telling us about that. Before I move on to our next registered speaker for this matter, who is the applicant, Lisa, we can't see the timer, and then it would probably help speakers to know how long they had left and things of that sort. If you can make that happen in parallel, that'd be terrific. Thanks very much.
Yep.
Okay, I'll invite Darcy Smith to address the panel, please.
Yes, good afternoon, panel. Darcy Smith, my name. I have had this property for quite a number of years, added to it over the course of years, and got a physical DA passed on it many years ago, and it has physical commencement. So the building can actually be built. It's a matter of practicality as whether it's built in the ground, the 2 levels of car parking, or built out of the ground. The panel report is partly incorrect from council to the panel. The report says there is 3 levels of car parking, which is incorrect. There is 2 levels. The floor space ratio has been increased. That is incorrect. It's not increased. There was a 4.55 put in on the 18th of the 10th, 19, which reduced it to 2 levels. The independent planner, Ken Dwyer, he recognised that in his report. The 4.55 I put in, which is the subject of this meeting now, there is no FSR increase in it. There is no increase in car parking. There is no increase in units. I'd like that to be made clear. If the building was allowed to be built with the car park 2 levels out of the ground, it would make the building a much greener building. And let's face it, that's what we're all trying to achieve today, a wiser and smarter buildings. The car parking out of the ground would eliminate major excavation. It will eliminate the inconvenience to the neighbours, as in machinery running to cut it and dig it out. The spoil, which would come out as thousands of cubic metres, will only fill up the landfill, which is full enough with rubbish at the present moment. The transport to the landfill is quite considerable, considering the amount of metres. There's thousands of cubic metres. Trucks are going to be on the road for quite a number of weeks. If the building was allowed to raise the 2 levels, we would eliminate the need for air pumps for exhaust fumes 24/7 running, water pumps running 24/7, lighting running 24/7. The building, if allowed out of the ground, would be far economical to run with regards to the maintenance of above. Corporate body fees would be drastically reduced if we didn't have to have all of the above running. The cost of in-ground car parking today is somewhere between 85 and 120,000 per site or per unit, car unit in the ground. This site would, I believe, comfortably cost around 100,000, if not more, if we have to put it in the ground. That can go less on a unit cost at the end of the day. Otherwise, all the developer's going to do, or myself is going to do, is pass it on to the prospective purchaser. As far as not being in the public interest, I find that difficult to understand how that statement could be made. At the present, there is a very old, over 100 years it's been here, a timber. It has many old dilapidated buildings on it and old housing as well. If this was allowed to go ahead, it would make it far easier to build the units. We could market them cheaper. Now, there's also a major need for new housing. So if new units were built on this site, surely it's got to be better for the units to be built than the dilapidated mess that's here at the present moment. With existing use rights, it can stay here indefinitely. The shortage of housing at the present moment certainly will be an advantage for the general public as well. So I can't believe it's not in the public interest. If we look at what we're trying to achieve, or what the Prime Minister is trying to achieve and the state governments are trying to achieve, we're looking at 1.2 million units over a 5-year period. Now, well, be it 217 units is not going to make a major dent in that, but it will certainly help. And if the panel allowed it to come out of the ground, we would save approximately $100,000 per unit with car parking. As far as the confusion with what is ground level and where is the car parking and what isn't and what is, ground level will be the first level of car parking. The second level will be car parking, and above that will be the units. There is pretty simple on that side of it, but just to clarify that point. When I submitted the 4.552, I spoke to the different guy at Plant Council, and we submitted it, and he came back to me and said, we have far too much information. You need to reduce it down to let us understand what you want, because it's just too much information. So we put it in again on a reduced information, and then we got it back, or it was refused the first time because too much information. We put it back in again the second time. It was refused because we didn't have enough information. I put it back in again now, and with a medium amount of information, but now it's basically refusing, or the panel, the council is refusing it for the basis of too much, not enough information, I beg your pardon. So we had too much, we had not enough, and now we've got not enough again. It's just crazy. As far as the precedent for above ground car parking, in the city block that this unit proposed development is, there is a units in Toowoomba Bay Road, which is 26 metres away. In other words, it's just one down. It has car parking fully above ground. There is units in Archibald Road, which is 54 metres away. It has car parking fully above ground. The car park that the units in Kitchener Road, which has just been built, has no car parking in the ground, and it is full car parking above ground. Not only is it full car parking above ground, part of the car parking is not even concealed. It's just sitting out for everybody to see. So what I'm looking at doing here is asking the panel to consider different proposals. And needless to say, it's the panel's choice. I want to approve in principle the 2 levels of car parking out of the ground. If that can't be achieved, maybe it could be classed as a master plan. And if that can't be achieved, maybe we could, if the panel was going to refuse it, I would ask for it not to be refused. I would ask for it to be either deferred to allow myself, my planner, an architect, Bruce from BSA Architecture, to negotiate with council to tidy up all of the problems that council has raised in their report. So that's pretty much, without spending a great deal more time, that's pretty much what I'm after and what I'm asking the panel. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Smith. Members of the panel, do you have questions or points of clarification for Mr. Piper, Mr. Smith, or indeed any of the council officers on anything that's been raised thus far? Grant, you look like you do.
Yeah, I think Mr. Piper needs some clarification. As the applicant just stated, there is a consent for this development. He's seeking to modify it, so it's not a proposal for, I think, 217 units. That's actually been approved. The matter that panel is considering is whether the consent should be modified, and that is to effectively remove the basement parking and put the parking that's required at 2 levels above the ground. So yeah, just for your information, Mr. Piper. Thank you.
And any other members of the panel have questions or for anybody at this point? Greg?
I don't have any questions, Chair.
Okay.
Yeah, none from me, Chair.
Okay, terrific. All right, we'll thank those speakers and move on to the second item that's on the agenda today. That's the Booker Bay matter, demolition of an existing dwelling and construction of a dual occupancy, etc. Our first person who's registered to speak is Francis Whiffen. So I'll ask Mr. Whiffen to come online, and it's nice to, well, I can't see you, but it's nice to have you back at the panel, Mr. Whiffen. No, maybe you can't see me either. By the way, the clock issue.
Hello there. Sorry, I was on mute.
No worries. I'm using this opportunity to just say that the clock issue seems to be not working, but that's okay. Lisa's keeping an eye on the time, and I will too. So over to you, Mr. Whiffen. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, and thanks for the opportunity to speak. My name is Francis Whiffen, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Peninsula Residents Association. The main reason that most submitters, and indeed myself, are against this DA is the proposed removal of the Australian brushbox street tree. The arborist, the council planner, and the architect had all agreed that there was no possible design that would allow retention of this tree. Last night, well, yesterday afternoon, I had a sudden rush of blood to the head and thought of a way that it could be done. So I emailed the planner and the LPP a design that does enable retention of the tree. It's a very simple solution and simply involves a 4.5 metre diameter car turntable outside the second garage that will allow the car to spin on its own axis and not need extra manoeuvring room to enter or leave the garage. It has a second advantage that it enables the driver to leave the property in a forward direction. As the absence of such a solution was given as the primary reason for removal of the tree, I strongly beseech the panel to make this solution or an equivalent and the retention of the tree a condition of consent should they decide to approve this DA. Now, for some extra context, I'd like to say a few words about Booker Bay. It has a high intensity of development, to say the least. It's almost entirely zoned R1, and the small bit that isn't is E1, local centre, even more intensive. Consequently, the Green Grid strategy specifically names Booker Bay as being among the worst suburbs on the Central Coast for heat island effect. This is caused by lack of tree and shrub cover and a preponderance of impervious non-reflective surfaces. Most of the figures in the Green Grid strategy were based on data from 2016 and 2018. So how is Booker Bay tracking now? Using the iTree canopy tool and based on Google imagery from 2022, the PRA has ascertained that Booker Bay contains tree and shrub cover 11.5% and impervious surfaces of 73.3%. The figure for tree cover, according to the iTree canopy tool, has an accuracy of plus or minus 1.42%. Most of the surviving trees in Booker Bay are street trees with virtually no mature specimens fronting multi-dwelling developments. I've just read a Sydney Morning Herald article that was published on March 20th last year about tree cover in the Sydney suburbs. It contains a ranked list of all the Sydney metropolitan suburbs, 31 in all, and their percentage of tree cover. At the top of the list was Hornsby, with a percentage of 78.6, and at the bottom was Bayside Council with 17.2.
That's time, Donna.
Oh, thanks, Lisa. Mr. Whiffen, are you coming to a
A couple more sentences.
Great.
That means that Booker Bay is worse than any Sydney suburb, even worse than Bayside, where the airport's located. Heat waves pose a greater risk to Australian mortality than any other natural hazard. I'll skip right to the end here. Oops, the end of the wrong one. In any case, what I'm trying to say is that any replacement tree for this would not really be providing shade for 20 to 30 years. And there really is no real need to get rid of it, as I've shown with my solution. So please, if you decide to keep this tree, we will send a great message out to the community and say, yes, we're really serious about preserving trees and the environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, our next speaker is Glenn Rogers, who is speaking on behalf of himself and also on behalf of Rosalind Palmer and Eileen Scobie. Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, that's Louise Scobie and Rosalind Palmer. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, all good. My apologies.
That's okay. Thank you. Look, first of all, I probably want to say I'm not opposed to the development at all, but I did have a couple of points I wanted to raise. The brush box tree at the front of the property at 83 is a much loved neighbourhood tree. Basically, it's a 50 to 60-year-old tree. It's been identified in the top quartile of trees that council wants to retain due to its age. Peninsula is a heat island, as we all know, and we have very few trees of this age. I don't believe we should be removing the tree due to its maturity. We should be trying to make, I guess, make way for it with redesigning the driveway. So basically, we're able to do this for the development 32 Corong Street, Nettlong, which is designated DA 2872022, which did actually make some changes, which I believe this one is able to do. And they were able to retain the tree as a result. Obviously, the council's identified keeping trees in their greener places strategy, so that aligns with council strategy as well. I believe you can make some room for the tree if you were to look at scaling down things. Perhaps, I don't know, maybe removing a couple of things, perhaps the pools, perhaps. The tree does offer vital shade. There's only 3 mature trees of this age on this stretch of Booker Bay Road, including that one. Okay, point 2 I had is just in relation to condition 6.19, which is part of 2.8C on the draft conditions of consent for 83 Booker Bay Road. dated the 14th of September. Relates to a side view on the front balcony that looks directly into my bathroom window at number 81 Booker Bay. I respectfully request that these conditions relating to fixed privacy louvers, which has been identified at 6.19, that is adhered to and set as a condition of consent, because it looks right into my bathroom and I don't think anyone wants that. Also, I request a ground covering at 83 Booker Bay Road along the shared boundary with myself at 81. It's been deemed as being a permeable surface, and as it's 8 inches higher and parts of that ground cover a lot higher than my block, I respectfully request that the non-permeable surface is made as a condition of consent as well, because it certainly would have the event of a lot of runoff due to the height if that was a non-permeable surface like concrete. So I would respectfully request that non-permeable surface is done as a condition of consent. Last point I'd like to raise, Chair, is there is a large window proposed at number 83 on the shared boundary side to the rear of our property that looks pretty much directly into the bathroom, our rear bathroom that we have on the property. You walk out and that's essentially where it would be. The fact that it's going to be 8 inches higher on the ground there would probably mean it would be quite a big view that they would get. I would request that we get maybe, I don't know, some privacy glass or a privacy barrier or something just popped in there just to obscure the view. And again, I don't think anyone would like to see that either.
That's 3 minutes, Donna. I wasn't
Thank
sure
you.
if you're giving them 3 per person or.
Well, I think Mr. Rogers might be just about finished as
Yeah, that's
himself
correct.
and
I'm
everyone
done.
else. Yeah,
Thank you,
Chair.
terrific.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, and our next person is Callan Patrick, who is speaking on behalf of the applicant, or may indeed be the applicant.
Hey, how you going? I am the applicant. I'm just here with my arborist as well. G'day. So just to start off, I want to say we aren't against trees at all. I've recently built in Booker Bay, Fallopian Street, and we were required to put 1 tree on the council nature strip, and we put 3 trees in. So we're definitely not against the trees. In the current state of the tree and the instructive roots present, a significant risk to the public assessing the nature strip as a thoroughfare. The roots have created undulations in the earth and a major trip hazard. Additionally, they've begun to significantly damage the curb, concrete, and the public area. In the current state, the curb cannot be safely navigated by several people in the community, inclusive of mothers with prams, the elderly, disabled people, and more. Our intention is to remove the tree solely because it impacts the functionality of the footpath. This will allow us to establish a safe level footpath that meets the community needs and ensures the safety of all users. Additionally, we are committed to promoting the natural beauty of the area and do not want to negatively impact the curb appeal of the greenery and locality. So we're happy to plant obviously more trees and come to a conclusion with whoever has a problem with this. Yeah, do you want to say anything?
Yeah. I think Mr. Whiffen made some great points there. And I actually agree with him with a lot of the points. Unfortunately, the specimen that we're talking about today, it's reached full maturity. It's not going to get any bigger. The damage that has been sustained to the driveway and curb are also impinging upon the road. So obviously you can't put bins out there already because the canopy blocks any bin pickup, and the bus has to divert out over that centre dividing line to get around that tree. Growing up on the Central Coast myself, I'm a qualified arborist, and my job is to manage the urban forest. I see this as a real opportunity to strengthen the urban forest by, unfortunately, yes, having to remove this tree, but replacing with a number of mature specimens. The developers here today, the owners of the property here today are completely not against replanting any number of specimens within reason. We've got a pretty decent and comprehensive list within that arboricultural report, which covers that. And yeah, I think it's an opportunity for myself to plant specimens that are going to be here in the future, because as my role as an urban forest manager, really do see it as a take one, but an opportunity to plant 4 or 5 trees or however many we would be required to do so to satisfy the complainants. Unfortunately, the Fostermans, the brush box tree, there's a lot of those specimens in the peninsula area. So we've already gone over the threshold of species designation. Now, if something does come through like a pest pathogen or climatic factors which would affect the brush box, we would probably lose 40% of the street trees in the peninsula because they're solely of one specimen type. So I think this is a really good opportunity to plant a different arrangement of specimens, multiple specimens. And then instead of having that one tree now providing 20 square meters of canopy cover, in 10 years' time, you could have 3, 4, 5 specimens, whatever, covering upwards of 40 square meters. And then in 10 years' time, upwards of 55, 60 square meters, and so on and so forth. So I think it's a real good opportunity for species diversification and to get some new plantings into the much needed area. Because, yeah, as Mr. Whiffen said, the urban heat island effect is real. Peninsula is actually ranked one of the worst in Australia. So, yeah, I just see it as an opportunity, really. That's my honest opinion.
Thank you. Would you mind telling us your name again so that we can put you in the minutes? We didn't have you registered to speak.
Yeah, sure. It's Tim Harwood, HARWOOD.
Thank you, Mr. Harwood.
No worries.
Okie doke. Members of the panel, do you have any questions for any of our speakers on this matter?
I do, Chair. I just want to ask Mr. Harwood realistically, how many trees could be planted between the proposed 2 driveways without them crowding one another, and what species of trees would he recommend?
Yeah, cool. Good question. So I've got a species list on the Arbor report, but the ones that I would specifically recommend, Corymbia eximia, which is already planted in various locations throughout the peninsula, so we know it does well down here. Spotted gum.
What's the common name?
Okay, so yellow bloodwood, your beautiful, bright yellow forums of flowers along Ocean Beach Road, and there's also a couple on Booker Bay Road itself. Spotted gum. Spotted gum are fantastic because they're a tall tree. We're in the endemic area for spotted gum. If you'll notice over at Wagstaff, there's remnant forests of the spotted gum, which extends over to Palm Beach and the Northern Beaches area. There's a few specimens that I've found on bushwalks in Blackwall. So it does grow over here. Spotted gum's fantastic. It's also planted prolifically throughout Sydney Olympic Park because it has a small root zone / root ball compared to the size of the tree. So you get a lot of bang for your buck. It's not an invasive rooter in the way that a brush box is. Like, you can already see the infrastructure damage down West Street from those brush boxes. I mean, that's a tree that gets 2.5 times bigger than any of the species that I've listed. It's a tree that grows in the rainforest in Yarrahatney. This is the brush box on the mid-north coast. And it was just a terrible idea to plant them. I love trees, and there's no such thing as a bad tree, but this was just unfortunate planning to plant those trees in the middle of the street. So, Corymbia eximia would be my first pick, seconded by a spotted gum. Thirdly, tree waratah, Phlammium aloxylon, Agathis robusta, and Eliocarpus humundii, blue condom. They're a bit more luscious, those last 2. You definitely need some more watering there for them, but fantastic trees. I think you could quite easily get one of the first 3. So a yellow bloodwood, a spotted gum, or a tree waratah. And then you could also back that up with a Eliocarpus humundii, Xanthosperm chrysanthus, the golden panda, which I know grows in this area as well. So you could easily get 2 mature trees in that area, and then the developers are open to planting in various parts of the coast if need be. There's also room out is there room out the back? So you've got...
Yeah, I was going to suggest that. What about on the site itself in terms of the front yard, rear yard?
How much space have we got in the backyard?
There's heaps, yeah.
Heaps.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, there's heaps of space available in the backyard for medium-sized specimens that would give a tree canopy cover equivalent to the stunted specimen out the front due to the restricted root zone.
And in terms of the species that could be planted on the site, as distinct from in the road reserve, are they similar species?
They are a native species, which would be less invasive to infrastructure on the ground. The reason I picked these species are they're broad canopy trees. They're beautiful tree, aesthetically speaking. They're prolific flowerers, so also encouraging local wildlife. Again, aesthetically, but they have the most important thing is a lot of those Lophostomans, the brush box, they get pruned so heavily, but their roots still keep growing. So you think of this tree that's only 8 meters high with a canopy area of maybe 20 square meters, but those roots are going to be on the other side of that road. And then in time, they're going to be under those driveways, cracking the driveway. The turntable driveway, I've been on sites in Palm Beach where we've had Project Arborist those sites. Yeah, that's quite a considerable outlay.
Sorry, not to interrupt, but Donna, just to let you know that council's Brian is our tree officer. He's on the call too, if you had any, or any of the panel members. Thank you.
Thank you, Elsa. Okay, back to you, Grant. Have you?
In terms of planting some replacement trees, and I'm concentrating now on the road reserve area. What sort of mature trees can you buy, off the rack, so to speak, that you could plant there? I mean, are we talking existing, trees of 2 to 3 meters in height that could grow reasonably rapidly, or are we talking about?
I can get you a 30-ton fig tree.
Depends how much you want to pay. Ultimately, I suppose.
Practically speaking, I can get you a 5 meter water gum, Tristoniopsis, beautiful tree. I can get that for $1,600 from Trees Impact plus delivery. So we'd be looking. You could plant anything up to. I mean, the sky's the limit.
Yeah, I suppose realistically, if the panel was of a mind to grant consent to this application, and was to impose a condition which required the replacement planting, that it would be reasonable it's possible to impose a condition which required a mature tree of, say, 4 to 5 meters in height.
Yeah, that's
and you
very
could go
reasonable.
and you could go and source one.
100%. Yeah, I could. There's multiple mature specimen nurseries on the coast and in Sydney that could supply stock.
Righto. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay, Greg.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Mr. Rogers raised a couple of issues. I just wanted to ask the staff for some clarification, if I could.
Yes, please.
So just to the assessment officer, Mr. Rogers raised 2 issues. One, I can't remember the wording of it, but it was sort of similar to, the tree was on a list. Is it on the significant tree list or some other tree list for the Central Coast?
Hi, yeah. So when I had a look at the significant tree register, I didn't see the tree on there.
For the viewers, please.
Oh, yep.
And what your role is?
Hi, everyone. I'm Brett. Can you see me?
No.
Oh, not yet.
Camera.
Anyway,
sorry,
flow on. There you are.
Yep. Yeah. Hi. Yeah. So I'm the assessment officer for the DA, and yeah, when I looked at
and your name is.
My name is Brad Dean.
Lovely.
And when I looked at the council significant tree register, I didn't see this tree on there.
Okay, and apparently we have Brian, the tree man, who's going to actually tell us his whole name and actual role. He might know more about that if he's council's tree person.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can't see you, but yes.
Yeah. Brian Pike, Tree Assessment Officer. No, it's not listed on council significant tree register.
Okay, that clarifies that. The Mr. Rogers also raised, and this is back to you, Brad, I presume. He raised another issue and said there was a similar type of situation somewhere else, and council resolved to maintain the tree and work their way around it. Are you aware of that application? And is it a similar situation to this one where that sort of solution could be made?
I'm not aware of the specific DA that he might be referring to. I saw one that came through in public submissions, and that was, I believe, that was a single dwelling, and there was more scope to move the driveway that could protect the tree. So it was a bit of a different situation to this.
Okay. That's it, Madam Chair. I've got nothing else to ask.
Thank you, Greg. Glenn?
Yeah, just a quick question regarding the tree. I'm under the impression that the root systems, well, I've seen it, it's breaking the guttering and into the road. So down the track, if any work is done around the tree, is that going to affect the tree's stability and lifespan?
Yes, this is the arborist talking. Sorry, Tim Harwood. The development does impose upon the SRZ, which is the structural root zone of the tree. So in essence, structural roots would be affected when the driveway is excavated and placed.
So Brian, would you confirm that if there was doing work there would harm the tree anyway?
Yes, there's just even the repair of that gutter would be deep into the structural root zone, and you wouldn't be able to have a footpath out the front either. There's a large visible route going back towards the property that would be cut. Yes, so any sort of, I think it's surviving because we haven't upgraded or fixed that infrastructure or put in a proper footpath yet, but any repair of that gutter would be a problem.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, we're done on that one. Thank you very much, everybody who participated in that conversation. We'll now move on to the West Street United Beach matter, and again, it's Mr. Whiffen who is going to address us first.
Well, hi there. It's me again. I'd like to start. Thanks again for the opportunity to speak. And once again, I'm representing the Peninsula Residents Association. I'd like to begin by reminding the panel of a recommendation that it made to the Central Coast Council that they review planning provisions for the peninsula. This was reported in the Peninsula News issue 559 on the 12th of December 2022. And the panel recommended that the Central Coast Council consider conducting a strategic planning review of the planning controls, development provisions, and character statements for Yamina, Woy Woy, and Ettalong. It stated that the review should ensure there's consistency between the relevant controls, provisions, and character statements applicable to each locality, and a clear direction and expectation on the desired future character of these suburbs. And these recommendations were made as part of its decision to refuse 2 applications for multiple dwelling developments at 16 and 34 Warra Street, Ettalong. Up to now, nothing much has happened. In an email to the PRA, Dr. Howell stated that Council recognises the need for improved planning controls around mitigating urban heat island effects and the importance that trees and other vegetation play in doing this, that the Council's Greener Places strategy required a review and update to Council's planning controls to include considerations of urban heat island effect for all future subdivision and medium and high density developments. Getting to this particular DA, basically it's an overdevelopment. I've already told you how bad the tree coverage situation is in Booker Bay. It's not much better in Yamina Beach, if at all. It only seems better on average because Yamina Beach is a much bigger suburb and contains a large area of bushland on the hills overlooking the peninsula and a substantial R2 zone. That's low density residential. I've no doubt that if the R1 component of Yamina Beach was isolated and analysed, it would be at least as bad as Booker Bay. All of this deforestation is caused by one thing: overdevelopment. Gun barrels like this one. They cover virtually the entire site with very little in the way of trees or shrub cover. You've only got to look at Google Maps to see that. To make matters even worse, Any street trees unfortunate enough to be in front of one of these developments becomes collateral damage. In this case, several variations, or should I say concessions, have been made or proposed to be made to allow the developer to cram 4 units on this site. It must be very tempting to allow this in the current superheated climate of the housing crisis. However, what is the point of building lots of dwellings that will soon become uninhabitable due to unrestricted heat sink temperatures?
That's
quote,
time, Donna.
Sorry, just a little bit more. To quote Quillam Griffiths, urban forest consultant, a city that cannot sustain trees will soon be a city that cannot sustain people. I've already drawn a comparison between conditions on the peninsula and how much worse they are in city suburbs. And the main reason for that is that if you look at, if you go into the New South Wales planning portal and look at the zoning, you'll see that the preponderance of zoning in the city, all the city suburbs, is low density, R2. Sure, they have spots of very high density, very high density, but the preponderance is low density, unlike the peninsula where the preponderance is general residential, which allows anything you can imagine virtually up to the height limit. That's why developments flock to the Central Coast from Sydney. And that's why you shouldn't allow these variations to these gun barrels, to allow these massive gun barrels to take up the entire site and destroy all the tree cover, because we're going to end up with a dead peninsula, basically. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whiffen. Okay, and our final registered speaker for today is Ravi Sharma, who is the applicant's rep for this Umina Beach matter. So, Mr. Sharma.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you. And fellow panel, thank you for the opportunity to speak for the proposal for the multi-unit housing development at 168 West Street, Umina Beach. I'll keep it brief and succinct, given that the proposal has already been rigorously assessed by Council's planning staff, and the details of this assessment has been provided online and published for about a week. So anyway, as outlined in the C and the assessment report, the site is located within the R1 general residential zone, as indicated by Mr. Whiffen, and was previously zoned to be medium density prior to the 2014 Gosford LEP. Generally, the Woolway Peninsula area is zoned R1 residential eastwards of Ocean Beach Road through to all the way through to Booker Bay. Within this area, subsequently over the last 50 years, post-World War II, the Sandplain subdivision has been in a transitional phase with redevelopment of older housing stock of various forms and styles of multi-unit housing and single-dwelling applications and developments, entailing an eclectic mix, really, of forms in terms of multi-unit development. This area is dominated by 70s and 80s circa single-storey brick and tile villa, somewhat austere and plain in its, I guess, presentation to the street. However, there has been some recent developments with more various architectural vernaculars presented within this area. Essentially, really, there's no real dominant style or aesthetic. Rather, if anything, there's historically the recent approvals on the peninsula entail an eclectic mix of building forms and style within this R1 zone. Currently, this site similarly has older housing stock and an older brick building at the front of the site that was previously used for commercial purposes, and a somewhat rudimentary 1970s circa red brick walk-up flat buildings located to the rear of the site. The site has minimal to no landscaping surrounding these, I guess, the austere buildings on the property. And in contrast, the proposal provides a residential multi-unit development that is a refreshing change to what's been established in the streetscape along the eastern end of Ocean Beach Road. And the development includes a 2-storey, 4-unit, 4 townhouse development with a mix of lightweight coastal style finishes, prepared, the design prepared by a local architectural firm, CKDS. Again, it's a real sort of upgrade of housing or multi-unit housing development in the context, surrounded by dominated by steel, brick and tile, low-rise, medium density along this strait. The site at 1,017 square metres is consistent with the dwelling yield obtained on smaller lots around the 700 mark that seek 3 dwellings on those sides lots, including the recent approvals such as 36 Coorong Street at Long Beach, a couple of streets away, and 36 Paul Street in Minor Beach that were approved by the local planning panel in July and December, respectively. It's noted that the DA has been for close to 2 years, and the only amendments requested during the course of assessment were purely based on technical engineering aspects, such as providing compliant sweep paths for forward egress to be compliant with AS 2890 off-street parking. So essentially outlined in the Statement of Environmental Effects and detailed in Council's assessment report, this multi-dwelling housing development has been proposed in accordance with the relevant planning controls applicable to the site, and meets the aims and objectives of those controls, and is consistent with the built form and yield of evolving character of multi-unit development within the R1 zone. Subsequently, I believe that the multi-dwelling housing proposal at 168 West Street, Umina Beach, is orderly use of the land and is therefore in the public interest. Thank you for the time to outline the proposal before you.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma. Now, before I hand over to panel members for their questions, we do have Dr. Howe on the line. I wonder if you wanted to respond to any of the remarks that Mr. Whiffen made about the broader strategic issues. Possibly not. Or if you are, you're on mute. Nope. All right, over to you, panel.
Madam Chair, I was just going to ask the same question actually of the staff. Did they know anything about that? And is it a draft plan or is it ahead of consideration? What is
Ailsa, I wonder if you're able to illuminate us on that, or Andrew.
Sorry, the question, just the question again, sorry.
So Mr. Whiffen talked about council or somebody's resolved to proceed with a strategic review. I was just wanted to know what standards that is. That a draft EPI or is it a matter for consideration?
Shannon.
Ailsa, would you like me to jump in?
A strategic person, perfect. Thanking you.
Our Greener Places strategy.
You are who and what's your role? And then you can
I'm Shannon Turkington. I'm the Manager of Strategic Planning at Council.
Thank you.
Council does have an adopted Greener Places strategy. And my understanding is that looking at the planning controls is a action of that strategy. At the moment, Council's priority is the review of our local strategic planning statement. And we are looking at a number of actions across strategies as part of that process, but that review of that strategy is not due to complete until 2025. So it'll be undertaken as part of that process.
Okay. Thank you, Shannon.
Chair, I think the issue that Mr. Whiffen raised was, and I think I sat on this particular panel, I think there was a recommendation in relation to some DAs that the panel, I think, suggested to the council that the broader planning controls in that area needed to be looked at. I think that's the issue that Mr. Whiffin's raising, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we haven't commenced that process yet. We are undertaking a lot of strategic planning this year with the adoption of our local housing strategy, employment land strategy, integrated transport strategy, and the local strategic planning statement. And once we have finished that bulk work, we will get on to looking at specific planning controls for areas.
Right.
So just to clarify, so Mr. Whiffen and everyone else knows what we're talking about here. That document hasn't got to a stage where it's ahead of consideration and assessment of this application. Is that right? The assessment officer there?
Yeah, that would be right. It's not ahead of, it's not been.
Okay, so
not
it's
yet
not
the process yet.
it's not a consideration, so it can't be considered
No,
in the
what was it raised was that we should look into it, and the control should start, the complaint objections of even getting in the peninsula to be taken to strategic and inform them and in their studies in the future. But no, there's nothing set for us to assess against.
Thank you.
Okay, what other questions do members of the panel have?
Oh, none.
Thank you, Greg.
Yeah,
Glenn?
none from me, Chair. None from me.
Grant?
I do, Chair. I have to ask Mr. Sharma about an issue that I have with this development, and that is the lack of landscaping. I think it's on the eastern side, but effectively the driveway goes all the way to the side boundary fence without there being any landscaping strip. Now, I'm just wondering what Mr. Sharma's thoughts are on imposing a condition which required, for example, I'm just making a suggestion that the garages be widened to allow a greater manoeuvring area, which in turn would permit a landscape strip to be provided along that boundary.
Thank you, Grant. Yeah, it's consistent with what's been established on these, I guess, single lots back in when the 2013 DCP came through. That really geared or orientated the concept of multi-unit development in the area to consolidate lots and to provide 3 to 4 metre side setbacks. Unfortunately, it purely came down to the economics of it all, not one development that consolidated and created those setbacks, because it just wasn't economically feasible. So since that time, there's been, I've been involved with about probably 50 at least along those lines. But to answer your question, the width of the lot being 15.24, the old 50 foot, makes it tough to get garages, compliant size garages, landscaping on one side, and then sweep paths to comply with AS 2898.1, including the 300mm buffer that's required by the engineers, leaving minimal area to squeeze in planting. But we can investigate that, absolutely. I see the benefit in regards to that, to soften the impermeable surface all the way to the boundary. I know there is a bit of an area just at the front of the entrance of the driveway that would allow some planting that would be, again, compliant with the standard, not being too high to mitigate or alleviate pedestrian site triangles, which is required again. But look, if I'll have to talk to the architects and designers in terms of if there's any opportunity to get a couple of 100mm at least, or include some native climbers or star jasmine or something along those lines to provide a strip down that eastern side, Grant. Yeah.
Because as I understand it, I think the standard is 2 metres, and there's nothing provided. And so, bearing in mind that the submissions about effectively the lack of landscaping on the site, I mean that is my concern with this development. I mean, as you point out, the old 50-foot frontages and providing townhouses, I've seen it, all over Sydney in the 90s and the 2000s in terms of providing a suitable building design. But it just seems to me, looking at this development, and it's quite a nice design. But I just am really struck by the lack of landscaping along that driveway side. Anyway, well, I think the panel may get some advice about that, but thanks for your input anyway. Done.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else for any of these people, panel members? No?
Okay.
Nope. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for speakers on that. We don't have any speakers for the fourth public meeting thing, the Kilcare Heights application. So that's it for the public meeting. What happens next is that the panel goes away to deliberate on these matters, and we will endeavour to get the minutes of our meeting up on the council's website just as quickly as we can. I'd like to thank everybody who came along to address the panel today, all the council staff, and of course the members of the panel. And I'll now close this part of the meeting, and if I could get the panel members and our secretariat back at 3:10 for the deliberative part of the meeting, that would be terrific.
Yep.
Thank you.
See you then.